So far we've been using the basic tools in Unity, terrain, and creating 3D objects like cubes and cylinders to build a basic world. But next, I would like us to try using the Unity Asset Store to get some pre-made 3D models that we did not make ourselves. So you get to the Asset Store. By default, in the scene window, there's a series of tabs up along the top: scene, game, and then asset store. And if you click search online, it will jump out to your default browser and open up the Unity Asset Store webpage. So that looks like this. And this is just on Unity's website. It's an asset store, sort of like the iTunes App Store or something like that. You can buy things here, but also a lot of it's available for free. We'll be using free assets, and it has a search bar, and it also has categories that you can search through. So, you can search for characters or environments or vehicles or props. A lot of it is visual. 3D models that could be used to create your world. But some of it is more like functional in terms of a piece of programming or some kind of asset that helps you control an aspect of your game or an animation or some other tool. As a starter, I'd like us to search low poly trees. Just to find a free one that I know works and that could be useful for us. When you've searched something or started to browse through categories, you'll notice that on the right side there is a refine by set of filters. I want to refine by pricing. So if pricing is not twirled open, you can hit the plus and then choose free assets. And then I'm going to use the low poly tree pack. Mine's grayed out because I've already downloaded it, but for you, if you never have, it'll look just as bright as all the rest of them. I'm going to grab this one from Broken Vector. I have no affiliation with them. I just think it's a cool tree pack. When you click on it, you'll get to see little, trailers and pictures of what's in this package. And you'll also get to see Unity versions that it supports. Usually with models like this, the version doesn't matter so much. This is an asset that will work for a long time. If you're downloading something that's more like a piece of programming that involves some sort of functionality, that might be very important to make sure that it is compatible with our Unity version. The other thing you might check while you're here is the file size. Some assets are very small, like this is less than a megabyte, so no big deal. Some asset packs are enormous. It'll be like 10,000 cars, and you're like, wow, it's like 2 gigs worth of, thousands of potential assets to use. So you can download those, of course, but as you import into your project, you might choose only to import the parts you need, because luckily you can import portions of an asset. So if it looks like something that you can use, and this one does, we're going to click Add to My Assets, which would be here in blue, but since I've already downloaded it, mine says Open in Unity. After you've added it to your assets, then you can click Open in Unity, and it'll jump back to Unity. Depending on your browser, it may ask you once, do you want to give this site permission to open up Unity? And you say, yes, I do. And then it'll jump to a window that is called the Package Manager, which is how you sort of organize things that you've added on to your Unity project. Things like from the Asset Store, for example. So I have more than you probably do if you're only just starting. I've downloaded other things in the past, but this one in particular that I was just downloading was called the Low Poly Tree Pack. So here it is in my Unity Package Manager, and to get it into this project, I need to click Download over here in the bottom right of this window. And then once it's downloaded, which should be pretty quick because, like I said, this is a small package, we're going to click Import. So this is where, as I mentioned earlier, you can pick and choose what you import. Now for this asset, I want everything. But let's just say that maybe there's parts I don't want here. Like for example, this is everything organized how it will be in my project. There'll be a folder called Broken Vector, which was the name of the developer of this asset. Then inside that, there'll be a folder called Low Poly Tree Pack. Inside that, it will have materials, 4 different materials for these trees. It'll have the models for all the trees. It'll have prefabs, which I'll explain in a minute. It'll have textures, and then it'll have a README file that explains how to use this. Let's just say I don't need the README file. It doesn't take a genius to put some trees in my project or whatever. Maybe I can click that one off and say, I don't need it cluttering up my stuff. If you were downloading an asset where, you wanted one of the trees, you could uncheck everything. You could select none and then just pick one of the trees or whatever. Just something to be aware of. But for this asset, I want all of this stuff. So I'm going to hit import, and it'll take a moment and import it all into my Unity project. Down here in my assets, I now have a folder, just as it promised, called Broken Vector, with low poly trees in it, with materials, models, prefabs, textures, and even that README file that I was thinking of getting rid of. So all that stuff came into my project and is available here. If I go back to my scene view, now we can put in our first tree. So I want to just show you real quick, these assets are well organized. They made sure to have materials separated from models, separated from textures. And I just want to give you a little quick vocabulary lesson. Materials, as you remember, were things you could put onto a mesh, like we made a brown material. Textures were repeated tiles that could be put onto a mesh or could be put on a material and then put on a mesh. So we had the grass was a texture, and the dirt and the rainbow were textures. And we even temporarily put like a tile floor into the albedo of our brown material at one point. So textures can be applied into the albedo of materials. But the models are the shape of the object. They're the mesh with no color. So if you were to put a model in, it would be the mesh of a tree, but no color. So you might want that because you might want to customize or whatever, but I suspect you don't. I suspect when you download assets, you want it to look exactly like it did in the trailer that you saw in the asset store. So to do that, the easiest way is to go into the prefabs folder. And most assets on the asset store will have what they were showing you made into prefabs. And what a prefab is it's everything all linked up already. So it's the mesh or model with materials and textures already applied as intended by the developer of that asset. So basically what I'm telling you is you can probably ignore everything but the prefabs when you download assets that you want to just use as 3D models. If they provide prefabs, I would just use those. If you want to really customize and you're like, no, I wanted this to be a purple tree with a yellow trunk or whatever, that's where you would get into using the pieces parts. But if you just want it to look the way that it was supposed to look when you downloaded it, grab it from the prefabs folder. So you can just click directly on any of these and drag them straight into your project. Once there in your scene view, if you're on our move tool, you can use this 3D cursor to move up, down, left, right, back, forth, X, Y, and Z. You can also go into the transform in the inspector for an object and change its position here. You can change its rotation, and this I think is maybe the most useful, you can change its scale. So if I wanted this sort of palm tree to be much taller, I could kind of stretch in one direction more than the other. If I want it all to scale equally, so the whole thing just gets bigger, but it doesn't change its proportion at all, I would make sure I scaled all 3 directions. So this is how you could customize your world with 3D models without having to be a 3D modeler. And this is very common. A lot of folks get into their first game design knowing more about programming than they do about 3D modeling. So you'll see a lot of game designers use provided assets. Then again, there's people who know more about modeling and nothing about programming. And so, like in our tutorials, we will largely not be writing code. We'll be doing this sort of visually. So anyway, the asset store is a really valuable tool for adding a lot more possibility visually to your world building. Next, we'll see how we can use the asset store to build actual functionality and gameplay into our world.